Alright, so this should be a pretty quick video, even though I'm going to walk through 3 different examples, because it really is almost the exact same thing as we've done already, and frankly things that you've done in previous courses like Algebra 2. Solving is really just one extra step. Well, it's not even an extra step, it's an extra thing to pay attention to, just in case you have to multiply or divide by a negative number. You got to do something, an extra little thing. And aside from that, it's the same, well, except that maybe writing the answer is potentially more complicated than just solving an equation. So let's just get started, because it really is the identical process other than an extra thing to worry about. Okay, so 2x minus 3 is less than 1. So we get 2x is less than negative 2 when we subtract 3 from both sides, right? All right, the numbers are pretty nice and easy on these 3 examples, no big deal. You know, we'll do harder ones together in class, but the numbers aren't so pretty. But yeah, you just subtract 3 from both sides, you get that, and then you divide both sides by 2. You get x is less than negative 1, and that's it. Now, negative number. We divided by a negative number. Now, there is a negative number in the problem, the negative 2, but that's not what we divided by. When we did this, you know, I didn't write it, and maybe I should have, although apparently I should not have because it looks ridiculous. Divide by 2, divide by 2. Okay? When I did that, look what I'm dividing by. I'm dividing by what is apparently a 2. And so only if you're dividing by a negative number do you change the direction. And that's not what I was doing. I was dividing by 2. So some students will see the negative in the problem and assume you have to switch. No, it's what you're dividing by that dictates whether or not a less than would become a greater than, or vice versa. Okay? So x is less than negative 1. And so I'm going to copy that and paste it over here, because we're going to talk about in a second how to write the answer. Well, one way to write the answer is this right here. And then there are 2 other ways. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, so there you go. So x is less than 1. So no matter what, x has to be less than negative 1. So that's the solution to the inequality. Let's do this one. So just like a normal equation, a good first move is to distribute. You know, get rid of what makes this look complicated. And so I would say that the parentheses make this a little bit more complicated. At least look, ooh, hey, look what just happened. It's very easy to do what I just did. In fact, I'm kind of embarrassed that I just did it. I didn't distribute very well. Whoa, what am I doing? Oh my goodness. That's wrong too. That's what I did. Alright, try again. 3y minus 6, and then the right side is just still the same. Add 6 to both sides. And then subtract 5y from both sides, and we get negative 2y is greater than 13. So remember what's up. You have to change the sign, because what I'm about to do, or what I'm currently doing, is divide both sides by negative 2. So the negative 2 is divided into both sides of the inequality. And since it's negative, well, first off, one thing is that the overall number over here is negative, because it's positive 13 divided by negative 2. And then also the greater than has to become a less than. Okay? Copy, boom, paste. And then last but not least, this guy. Once again, I really don't want you guys to just, you know, skip problems with fractions. That is the last thing I want you guys to do. Don't just freak out because it's a fraction. And so the very first move here is to, well, like I said, you know, when we did equations involving fractions, get rid of the fractions as soon as you can. Right? That generally is in the best interest of, you know, solving the problem correctly, because, you know, so many students are very phobic, you know, fraction phobic. All right? So getting rid of them as quickly as possible is probably in your best interest, and so that's what you do here. And the trick is, multiply both sides by the negative 6. And so I multiply this by negative 6. Okay, and look, what happens is, and this is something that students tend to screw up sometimes, when you multiply the left side by negative 6, it just cancels. That's the whole point, is that it actually makes that side significantly simpler looking. It just gets rid of, it's basically a cross canceling within fractions. Negative 6 over 1 cross cancels with the negative 6 on bottom. So the only thing that's left is this. And then, you got to change directions. We just multiply both sides by negative 6. So it has to go from less than to greater than. And then it becomes negative 30, because that is 6 times, negative 6 times 5. And then add 4 to both sides, and then it's negative 26. Alright, so how do we write the answers? No big deal. There's basically 3 ways to communicate the answer. There's regular old with inequalities, okay, which is already up there. And actually, let me do this. There we go. Blue is good. Okay, 3 different problems. Let me separate them. Okay, so one way is with the inequalities notation. One way is with the number line. Okay, and x is less than negative 1, so really, since I'm making up the number line myself, there's no marks already, I can just put negative 1 right there in the middle. X is less than negative 1, so we shade to the left. Alright, and this is something, we've seen this already this year, I'm pretty sure, unless I'm losing my mind. And then we do this, okay, open circle. Or, in fact, well, actually I'll get to that. So that's interval notation. There's another way of doing interval notation, and I'll remind you what that is again in a moment. But x is less than negative 1. So the other way of writing that is with interval notation. So there's number line notation. Okay, this is number line notation. This is inequality notation. And then there's interval notation, which is the answer is all the numbers between, well, negative infinity and negative 1. Okay, remember what the parentheses means. It means that ending number is not included. It is not a part of the answer. Negative 1 is not less than negative 1. That's wrong. Okay, so we don't want to shade this in, because that would be saying that negative 1 is an answer, and it is not. Okay, so let me undo. So yeah, it looks like this, as weird looking as that might be. And then this is interval notation. So it looks like an ordered pair kind of, although not really with the infinity sign in there. But it looks kind of like a point, a ordered pair, but it's not. It's interval notation. It's the way of representing all the numbers less than negative 1. And I made a mistake. Yeah, this whole problem I made a mistake. Let me fix that here. Oh my goodness. Boom, 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 and boom. X, y is less than or equal to that. And so fix it here. Okay? So I put negative 6.5. Actually, let me not do it that way. Why not do that way either? So I put like negative 6, negative 7, what the heck, negative 8. And our answer is halfway between that negative 6 and negative 7. This is negative 6.5. So boom, it goes right there, roughly. And notice I shaded in the circle because it is less than or equal to. And then we shade to the left. Okay? And then, so it's negative infinity and interval notation. This is interval notation, negative infinity to negative 13 over 2. Now, however, 13 over 2, negative 13 over 2 is part of the answer. So we have to include that by putting a bracket. Okay? And so let me pause and actually back up a little bit. The parentheses in the back bracket is the other way you communicate, whether or not the end is included on a number line. So, this is, just to reiterate, -6.5. It's halfway between -6 and -7. Okay, that's included in the answer. The other way of, writing number line notation is, well, I'll just do it up here. Or like, oh no, that's horrible. Basically, it's the bracket instead of the shaded in circle, or it's a parentheses instead of a shaded in circle. So you might, in fact, that's how our book does it, which is kind of rare, I feel like, in high school textbooks. Same thing, well, different thing. It means the same thing. This means the same thing. So if this is on, let me draw the straight line. It's weird looking, I think, at this stage. Boom, boom. Okay. So it would be shaded to the left like that, with the end of it being a parentheses, or be shaded to the to the left like that, and there you go. So that's the notation. So that's how you might see it sometimes. Okay, these are the ugliest arrows ever, but I hope you get the drift here. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Last but not least, this one, and actually this is nothing new. It's the same song and dance really. X is greater than -26, so -26. Z is greater than -26. Open circle or parentheses, and I don't really care which one you use. The book that uses parentheses. I tend to use open circles. It's the same idea, different notations. Open circle, and then shade to the right. So there you go. Solving inequalities and how you write the answer. I didn't write the answer here. I didn't write it the third way. So from -26 to positive infinity, that's the solution. And it's both parentheses because that is a greater than sign. And by the way, I should have mentioned it before, it's always parentheses with the infinity. So notice I put parentheses with negative infinity, parentheses up here with negative infinity. That is because that is not a real number, and so it's not supposed to be part of the answer. Alright, so there you go. Hopefully that's helpful for what we're going to do tomorrow in class.